You all look fantastic. You all look like a winning team. And it is such a joy to work with Cedric Richmond. Isn't he fantastic? Not only is he wonderful, a great spirit, a hard worker, but he has his priorities in the right order. Louisiana first. And Karen Carter, I tell you, we have not had a chairman work this hard in a long time. How do I know? Because she texts me at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, Karen, I am sleeping, you know? We have a chairman that never sleeps. Let's give her a round of applause. And we have many mayors here. Kip Holden is here, the great mayor of Baton Rouge, and many, many other mayors. But we've got a wonderful leader, a wonderful mayor, Mitch Landrieu from New Orleans. You all know how important this race is, and I am so grateful for all of your support. I am so proud of the members of Congress that have come from Ohio, Illinois, New York, and most importantly, the congressman from Louisiana that works with our delegation and will tell you the truth about who shows up, who's there when seniors need her, who's there when students need help, who is there to help creating jobs right here in Louisiana. And we can tell you that is the work that we do on your behalf every single day. I am proud of my record to help with you lift our state after Katrina, Rita, Gustav, Ike, and Isaac, and the BP spill. That takes hard work, it takes unity, it takes toughness. And my opponent, who will go unmentioned, for those of you in the river parishes, heads up. For those of you in this district, heads up. When we all stood up for you in Washington to vote for aid for Isaac, he voted no. We voted yes. Can you believe that? You need someone to stand up for you every day, whether it's disaster aid, whether it's aid for students. We have 600,000 people. President Clinton knows this, and I'm going to bring him up in a minute. We have 600,000 people in this state with student loans. Did y'all see the debate? I asked my opponent, his name will go unmentioned. I asked my opponent, what will you do to help students? Would you join me in reducing their interest rate from 11% to 3%, saving them $8,000 each on their loans? Will you help me double Pell Grants? And we most certainly can pay for that. He said he would not. So students and adults that have 600,000, he is doing things to hurt us in Washington, not help us. So let's do a little something to hurt him at the polls, all right? Let's do a little something. Now, I also want to say, I am proud to be chair of this Energy Committee. If there was ever a time for Louisiana to stand together and work with our neighbors in Texas, Mississippi, and yes, Arkansas, our neighbors, our group down here, we know how to produce energy, and we do it well. You know, we can do it better, we can protect the environment, and we can use the resources of our nation to create wealth. Not just for a few people at the top, not just for a few well-connected politicians, but for all of our children and our grandchildren. We can produce and create the jobs of our dreams. We have the gavel. It's mine, but I have it on your behalf. Let's not give it up to somebody that might not even get on the committee. I mean, he's not even going to get on the committee, ladies and gentlemen, all right? So we've got this gavel. We've got a record to run on for our students, for our adults struggling to get a great education. Please don't side with Jindal and Cassidy. Get with us, all right? Get with us. And let's get it done. And one man who knows this as well as anybody here, I know we have some great politicians in the House. I can see y'all. I see these young legislators that are coming up that have been walking the streets. But there's a young man I'm going to introduce you all to. Yes, he is still young. He is still going strong. And he needs no introduction from me, but we are honored to have our friend, our neighbor and the 42nd President of the United States, Bill Clinton.
Thank you. Whoa, well, you know, here I was, all ready to come up and extol Senator Landrieu's virtues and tell you how wonderful it was to have one honest politician in the race, and she introduces me as a young man. But that's sort of a forgivable exaggeration. I'm glad to be back in Baton Rouge. I love Louisiana. A lot of you know that I worked hard for this state in the aftermath of Katrina with the first President Bush. I hung around and worked for years, and when I was president, we did pretty well economically in Louisiana too, and I'm glad to be back. And I want to thank Congressman Richmond for being here, for his service, and for supporting Mary. I'm very proud of Mitch Landrieu. I'm proud that he stayed in politics, kept running, got to be mayor of New Orleans, and he's done a great job down there. I've known Karen Carter Peterson through my friendship with her father. I knew her way before she was old enough to vote. And I'm really proud of the work she's done as our hardworking Democratic chairman. Mayor Holden, thank you for welcoming me here, and I want to join Mary in recognizing two other members of Congress, Representative Robin Kelly from Illinois and Representative Marcia Fudge of Ohio. Now, Marcia Fudge is leading this effort to get out the vote around the country, and Robin and others are helping her. And that's what I want to say here. You know, I'm fixing to make an argument. I love to do that. But it won't amount to a hill of beans if you don't show up. Isn't that right? And I want to tell you something about all these polls you see. The polls are all over the map. They say we're ahead, we're behind, we're this, we're that. Every poll you see is right. How can they be right, right? They give you contradictory results. The reason is every poll correctly measures the people they call or talk to, and they tell you what they said to them. But all the polls assume that they have just the right mix of people who are going to show up and vote. Whether they do or not will tell the tale. Now look, I'm not mad at anybody. I've had a wonderful life. My whole life, except at election season, is always around my foundation, the work I did in New Orleans after Katrina, the work I do around the world. And I just try to help hardworking people make the most of their dreams, solve health care problems, give education opportunity to people around the world. But the one thing I know is wherever people are working together, across the lines that divide societies, good things are happening. Wherever they're fighting all the time, good things are not happening. The problem is that at election time, some people really like a conflict-oriented model. They want to believe they're all good, their adversaries are all bad, something's terrible. And we all know what's going on, all of us Southerners, don't we, in this election? The Republican Party has suddenly developed a sense of limited vocabulary. I'm from Arkansas. I just got back from 2 days there. And again, I'm not mad. I got no reason to be mad. I got my first grandchild at 3 weeks old. And mother and child are fine. Grandmother's over the moon. I just went home to my 50th high school reunion. And my take on all this stuff that's going on is different, not only because I've been president and because I've had a chance to be governor of your neighboring state for a dozen years and because I work all over the world, but because just since my last high school reunion, I buried 26 of my classmates, or we did, and a lot of them were close friends of mine. And when you've got more yesterdays than tomorrows, the only thing that really matters about all this stuff, there are three things. Are people better off when you quit than when you started? Do children have a brighter future? And are we coming together instead of being driven apart? That is all that matters. And look, the rest of this stuff is all background music. So I'm going to do my best to tell you why I think this race is so important, because I want you to tell your friends. I know I'm preaching to the saved here. And like I said, I don't know if I'm very good at it anymore. I feel like an old racehorse. And I'm retired over here in this stable, you know. And all of a sudden at election time, they come in and bring me an extra bale of hay. And then they put the reins on, take me out to the track, and slap me on the rear and see if I can make it around just one more time. But look. So I'm not mad at him, but I know what works is working together. But sometimes in campaigns, since you have to honestly emphasize your differences, sometimes one side or the other will just try to get somebody mad, and they'll foam at the mouth and steam will come out of our ears. Now, let me tell you, when you get to be my age, you've had a lot of people try to sell you a lot of things. I mean, look, turn on television, and some of these programs you can't watch for all the TV ads. They're trying to sell you something. People call you on the phone all the time. You get all these automated calls. They're trying to sell us something. It's the greatest thing. When I got out of the White House and started answering my own phone at the house, I'm always talking to these strange ladies trying to sell me something. People go door to door trying to sell you something. Here's what I've learned in all these years. Whenever somebody's trying to sell me something, tries to stop me from thinking, it's been my experience that they do not have my best interest at heart. Whenever someone is trying to sell me something and they trust me to think, they trust me to disagree with them, they invite me to have a conversation with them, I'm inclined to go along whether I agree with them all the time or not. Now that's what's going on here. That's Louisiana Senate race. There's always a big difference between the trend lines and the headlines. Headlines are disturbing. We do have a national security problem with Islamic terrorism that unfortunately did not go away when the United States military got Osama bin Laden. That's going to go along for a while. We live in an interdependent world, and all the good things about it are obvious. An 8-year-old kid in Baton Rouge can get on the internet and find out things in 30 seconds I had to go to college to learn. Right? That's the good news. The bad news is that somebody in Iraq or Syria can get on the internet and go to a social media site and find a disgruntled person in the United States or the United Kingdom, or two blonde-haired, blue-eyed teenage Austrian girls, and convince them they ought to come over and join ISIS and blow themselves to smithereens. It's the world we live in. We have to manage it to be secure. So there's a lot of good in it and some trouble. I wish this Ebola thing hadn't happened, but we don't need to panic about this. I got a different view of this than most people for very personal reasons. My foundation ran the AIDS program, or was in Liberia before this happened. And because of Ebola in Liberia, we had to take our people out of the field. But they asked us if our top 4 people would stay behind and help them organize a response, because they have no health care system to speak of, having been through a 14-year civil war. Those 4 people are still there. And I thank God that they are well. But look, this is a serious thing, but we are learning how to deal with it. We are going to deal with it, and we're going to be fine. Every place that's hit before in Africa was in a non-urban area. You finally, you isolate everybody and it burns itself out. And that didn't happen this time, so we're working on getting a hold of it. But you're going to be surprised, I think, once we get up and going, how well it's handled. And they're beginning to get ahead of it there. But the main problem is in these poor countries, they don't have any health care system. They had an Ebola case in Nigeria, and they just been officially declared Ebola-free. Why? Because they had 500 doctors go to 19,000 homes immediately. They had the kind of systems we take for granted here in the United States. So we'll deal with that. The fundamental problem is still what it has been for 30 years, or almost 40 now, except in the 90s when I was president, which is we're coming back as a country economically, but the benefits are not broadly shared. That's the fundamental problem. We had a terrible financial crash in 2008. Everybody here remembers it of a certain age. In the last 150 years, America's had 4, 1872, 1892, 1932, and 2008. There have been a lot of them in other rich countries around the world. Japan had a terrible one in 1990. On average, these things take 10 full years to get over. That is, it takes 10 years just to get back the jobs you lost because of the financial crisis. We got all those jobs back last month, which means it took us 10 years and a month. Or 10 years and a month. I mean, not 10 years, 6 years. So we're running 4 years ahead of schedule here. Now, I don't expect anybody to be happy. I don't think anybody will get any votes out of that, but it's a fact. And what that means is we are now poised to create a future for Louisiana and for the United States. And the question is it going to be a future we can all share, or a future where all the gains go to people at the top? People ask me all the time, what's the best thing you did as president that you're proudest of? And I always say, well, we had an economic recovery under President Reagan, and we had one under me. The difference is that the top 5% did better when he was president even than they did under me, although they did real well under me. But if you look at the bottom 20% of working people, which is more than 20% of Arkansas and Louisiana, under Reagan, their incomes went up 0.7%. When I was there, 23%. We moved 100 times as many people. 100 times as many people worked their way from poverty into the middle class. Worked their way. Now, that's what we need again. That's really what this election ought to be about. Our friends in the Republican Party can say whatever they want about the president. His 2 terms will finish in 2 years, and I think it's a pretty slick argument they're making. You just got one more chance to vote against him. You got to take it. You know you want to. Isn't that about what they're saying? So, unfortunately, you have to give me 6 years to do your 2-year protest, and I'm going to vote against you for 6 years, but you need it so bad, I want you to do it anyway. That is the argument against Mary Landrieu. Let's all just admit what the deal is here. So let's examine that argument. First of all, whatever you think, we got out of this thing 4 years quicker than the historic average over 150 years. 4 years quicker. Now, second, therefore, this is going to be about jobs and incomes and education and health care and families and communities. It is not going to be about all this political junk people keep talking about. That's what this election's about. So one of the things we know is if you want to have shared prosperity, you got to educate people better. Mary Landrieu has done everything she can do to reform the student loan program, cut the cost of financing college, make it easier for people to repay, and every single thing she's for, her opponent is against. You can't hardly blame him for wanting you to think about something else, can you? Really. Or I'll give you another example. Louisiana, thanks to Mary Landrieu, has been able to produce more oil and gas. We may be even in a position to export some of it, and we're exporting a lot of other things, but she is for the Export-Import Bank, which the Tea Party's against, and he's caught betwixt and between, and he can't take a position to save his life. Now, you got $2 billion in exports riding on this. You got lots of jobs here on this. And I know what they say. They say it's a subsidy of big corporations. That's not true. All they do is finance free market produced exports in a way that makes the financing in America competitive with other countries. Don't you want us to be competitive with other countries? And if other countries were giving their companies loans at low interest rates to make sure they could finance it to save jobs in their country, wouldn't you want us to save those jobs in America? That's all this is about. So you hear that Export-Import Bank, sounds like somebody's trying to teach you a foreign language. It's just a question of, if you want to sell something to somebody else somewhere else, you got to be able to finance those sales on terms that are competitive with the people who are trying to do the same thing in other countries. I do not blame them. I honor them for wanting to be as competitive as possible, but I think we ought to meet the competition. I noticed LSU had a pretty good comeback on Saturday. And so it'd be like somebody saying, well, I'd like to leave our guys in the weight room, but those gyms are getting more and more expensive to finance, and we're just not going to do it. And pretty soon, skinny little football players would lose every game 80-0. That's all. That's what this Ex-Im Bank deal's about. It's about meeting the competition. She's right, and he's not. I'll give you another example. The minimum wage and equal pay laws. She's for him, he's not. There's a federal minimum wage bill pending. All of not just Mary's opponent, all others say, oh, this will cost jobs. I raised the minimum wage when I was a governor. I raised it when I was president. I tried to raise it twice. Every time I did it, people said, oh, this is going small. We had an exemption for small businesses, and everybody said it's going to be terrible. Now, if you raise the minimum wage to $20 an hour tomorrow in Louisiana, it would be so much so fast it would cost jobs. Nobody's talking about doing that. But if you don't raise it every now and then, when all the gains are going to people at the top, inequality will get worse, and it hurts the economy. And that's not just me. Republican economic analysis says it hurts the economy. Why? Because 70% of our growth is due to consumption. Somebody's got to buy something for somebody else in order for somebody else to make money making it in the first place. Isn't that right? So if you raise the minimum wage in Louisiana, you don't just help the people who get the minimum wage, you help lots of people right above them who also get a raise. Every time I did it, it grew the economy. And so it'll help here. She's right, her opponent's not. I'll just give you one other example. When my granddaughter starts kindergarten, this is serious. This is a big issue for my granddaughter's mother and grandmother. They do a lot of work on this in our foundation. Now listen to this. When my granddaughter starts kindergarten, if we don't do something to make preschool education more available to all of our children, then my granddaughter will have heard 30 million more words than the children of working families whose parents had to take them to a daycare center early to go to work with a limited job, and they don't have a college education, they don't have books in the house, they don't have time to do that. That's not right. Those other little kids are just as worthy as my granddaughter is of having an even start in life. And it's not right. It isn't right. And guess what? It's good economics. The last thing I want to say is Senator Landrieu has taken a terrible beating for voting to let Medicaid expand into Louisiana to families that make up to 138% of the poverty level. Right? Oh, it's terrible. She voted for Obamacare and all that. So let me tell you something. I was telling Mary this, coming back here. I just got back from 2 days in Arkansas. My governor, Mike Beebe, a Democrat, in a state that also typically votes Republican, is one of only 2 governors in America with a job approval rating of 70% or higher. Why? Because he took the Medicaid money that Governor Jindal rejected. And so, finally, my native state ranks #1 in something really good. We rank first in America in the reduction of people without health insurance. More than 200,000 people got health insurance. And listen to this, because I just read about it in Louisiana. Blue Cross and Blue Shield here have announced that they want at least an 18.5% rate increase. About a week before that, Blue Cross and Blue Shield and the other health insurance in Arkansas, insurers, they announced they think next year in Arkansas, rates will go down 2%. Now, why is that? Why is that? Because we took that Medicaid money, those working families got insurance, the rural hospitals get paid, the doctors get paid, the urban hospitals with a lot of poor folks get paid, and they don't have to load all those costs onto the rest of you in higher insurance rates. So I say we should thank Senator Landrieu and say that everybody else ought to follow her lead. And you don't have to take my word for it. It's not that far to the Arkansas state line. Get in the car and go up there and see. Now, the other thing I want to say is she's going to do the right thing. That's enough reason to vote for her, but she also does it in the right way. I saw her work for 10 years to make sure that Louisiana got a fair share of the revenues, not only from like the fines that BP is going to pay, but the proceeds of offshore drilling. 10 years. That's not a 30-second television ad. That's not calling somebody who disagrees with you a dirty name. It's knocking on their door and figuring out how you can work with them. We've called each other enough dirty names. We need to knock on our neighbor's door and figure out how we can work with them. And I've seen him try to portray her like she was some crazy subversive, when the truth is, every one of these analyses that the nonpartisan groups in Washington do show that she is A, one of the most bipartisan people in the United States Senate, and B, one of the 10 most effective people in the United States Senate. And look, you have military installations in Louisiana that are benefiting from this. You have education institutions in Louisiana that are benefiting from this. And you have economic interests that are benefiting from this. Now just think about it. What this election is really about, not the headlines, it's the trend lines. We got back to ground zero. We got over the impact of the financial crash. Now we got to build a future that we can all share, a future of shared prosperity and shared opportunity and shared responsibilities. And that means you've got to make it easier for everybody to go to college and pay their loan off. You've got to make it possible for everybody to start school and get through school on more or less equal terms so they have a chance when they finish high school to build a good future. And you've got to keep diversifying the economy and creating economic opportunities. This is not a close question, who would do the best job of this. She should be winning this race, especially being chairman of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee, being on the Homeland Security Subcommittee. She'd be winning this race by 10 or 15 or 20 points, but for the difficulty of the moment in which we live, which invites people to play blame games instead of just calm people down and say, look where we are and where we can go. Now, I am telling you, if the issue is who's going to create more jobs, who's more likely to raise your income, who's more likely to empower your kids to go to college, who's more likely to see that the communities in Louisiana get the resources they need to get them off to a better start, who's more likely to protect the national security and the resources you have here invested in it, the answer to those questions is Mary Landrieu, and you know it as well as I do. So, I will end where I began. This is all very nice, but it won't amount to hill of beans if you and everybody you know don't vote. All the polls you see that are good and bad are all right. They just have different assumptions about who's going to vote. You cannot afford to vote for what you're against. You have to vote for what you're for. You cannot afford to vote for people who are trying to stop you from thinking. You have to vote for people who trust you to think. You cannot afford to vote for people who say, I'm just like you. You got to cast that one last protest vote. You got to vote for people who trust you to agree and to disagree, who will knock on your door and sit down with you and drink a cup of coffee and try to work through every crisis to a good solution. This is not just about a Senate race. This is about who we are and what we want and how we intend to build the future. We have got a chance to do it now. We cannot blow it. And in Louisiana, that means re-electing Mary Landrieu. Thank you, and God bless you.